fat hen. So these are the weeds that we get all the time. It's a really good root system. This one's called marshmallow weed. It grows really well here, like a potato at the bottom.
Well, can you eat it?
Cattle don't like it,
Yeah.
nor do I. And this is the bast of a thing. This is
Oh,
called
no.
mother-in-laws or sticky beaks. And its botanical name, I think, is called Biden's pilosa. These little black things there. They get into everything,
Oh.
and they're a shocker. They're the three ones that we've got growing at the moment.
No, those are awful. Is there a reason they're called mother-in-laws?
You'd have to ask my mother-in-law.
All right, thanks for that weed lesson, David, but I think we'd all be better off
Oh,
without it.
bad pun. 4 o'clock or a bit after 4 on Sunday. David Lowe here, new shirt. We're in the Merlot vineyard, and this is a vineyard that is called Block 6, but in fact I'm standing in front of a Zinfandel vine. That has, the reason we're doing that is because this was originally planted to Merlot in 1996, and I wanted to make Merlot on bush vines, and for about 10 or 15 years we made the wine out of this Merlot, but I wasn't happy with it. It was quite dry, quite tannic. The sort of Merlot wines that I wanted to make, I wasn't making with this. So I guess rather than pull it out, what I did was I grafted it. And to graft it, we take a bud like that, a little bud, and we cut it out and we put it inside the bark of the Merlot vine. We put a Zinfandel bud into the bark of the Merlot, and now this is Zinfandel. So we know Zinfandel bush vines work, and we'll talk about that another time. We now made this Merlot rootstock, or the root system was Merlot, but the vine on top became Zinfandel. So we turned a Merlot I was unhappy with into a bush vine Zinfandel, which we're very happy with. But we're going to talk about Merlot. So what I did with the other half, which is on this side, we're going to walk across to here, and we decided to convert this to a trellised Merlot vineyard. Now, those of you who know my background know that I did a vintage or harvest at Chateau Petrus, arguably the world's most famous Merlot producer in Pomerol in France. In fact, Angus Wilson, my mate from Mudgee, was telling me the other day, he was surprised I worked at Chateau Petrus. I mean, a lout like me, but I got a good job there and I learned a lot. Angus owns KPMG in Sydney, by the way. So why we did this Merlot on this trellising is where I went back to my roots in Chateau Petrus in Pomerol, France. And we decided that we would try and put a trellising down because that made wines of much more fragrance and brightness and fruit. That's the sort of character I want in Merlot, not big, heavy, tough Australian reds. Merlot is a very soft, fragrant wine. It's all like a sort of a voluptuous red Chardonnay, if you like. And what I'd learnt in those years over there was that if you had the vines closest to the ground, you generally had smaller bunches but more perfume. And we put the trellising down here, these wires here, and we strap the cane or the piece of timber growing part of the vine onto the wire, and it allows the bunches to form along horizontally. Whereas the bush vines, where I was, they are close to the ground and like a bonsai system. That concentrates it. Here we're getting much more fragrance and perfume. Why we do that? Because we need to make very good Merlot. Australia's really had some rubbish Merlots in the past. Two reasons. The first primary one is that we try to make Merlot, it gets a greenness and hardness to it. The second reason was for 30 years, from about 1960 to 1990, the Australian Merlot vines were generally not Merlot. We found out afterwards that when someone came out to discover this thing, he said, these are not Merlot vines, these were another variety altogether. So as such, all the Merlots we've been making a long time ago weren't really Merlot at all. They were a variety that wasn't as good as Merlot. So finally, we're working out what makes good Merlot. And not only is it how you grow it, it's how you make it. What I've learned over my 40 years is that with Merlot, it's really not about making an aggressive wine. It's about wine having concentration. We don't irrigate the vines, so they are concentrated. You might notice these are left behind. These are in fact, these are the grapes this year we left behind because of the smoke taint. Those who missed last week, this is because our fruit was affected by smoke taint and we were unable to harvest anything. So these are the remnant bunches left last year. And when we prune them, we'll cut these off.
So when will we prune, David?
So we'll prune these varieties when the leaves fall off. At the moment there's still a few leaves. They're slightly small and they're doing the last bit of photosynthesizing. That means the energy that they're accepting from the CO2 transports into sap into the tissue, and that goes into the trunk and storage for next year when we start shooting in September, or September this year. So we'll start pruning in about a month's time when all the leaves fall off. They go into dormancy. That dormancy comes from mostly to do with temperature. As it gets colder, the leaves fall off. They go to become dormant, and we can prune it back to the wood that we want to have for future crops and future quality. This is a quality issue pruning. We prune quite hard, so we have very few bunches, but we'd rather have good wine than rather have lots of it.
And I've heard that the bunches for the next vintage are already decided in the vine.
Yes.
What about that?
So at about October last year, when the grapevines flowered, these baby bunches, if we cut them off, and I don't know if you can see it, but we put a microscope, cut this and look under it, there are baby bunches in that. Those baby bunches are already formed last October. So this crop in 2021 was determined in 2020. So that next year's crop was already determined. So by pruning, we want to select the right buds so that we make the best wine possible.
Well, that's incredible.
Now, it wouldn't be a wine tasting, it wouldn't be an education or talking lesson without going to the vine glass tree, which I have here. And we're just going to go down into the rye corn and pick up our bottle of Merlot. Oh, by the way, this is the crop that we put into row. So we grow this product called cereal rye sun, or rye corn. We plant it in March usually, and away it gets. You have a little bit of the warm temperature of the soil. We've had blessed with some nice rain in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and away it goes. You can see the seed head's just about to form now.
Wow.
This will grow organic matter. This will lift our organic matter up. The organic matter we plough it back into the soil. That organic matter enriches the soil. We put the organic biodynamic preparations in it. That organic matter holds more moisture. That's how we can get away with having to use drip irrigation or supplementary irrigation, because the water holding capacity of the soil is increased because we've livened up the organic matter by growing this cereal rye in winter. It's not competing with the grapevines, because the grapevines over the next month are starting to shut down. It's a great process.
David, we've had a question come through, and as we were talking about the buds and the grape bunches being formed in the vine last year, does that mean that the smoke taint can carry over?
No. That's a really good question, and we often wondered about that. What appears to happen with smoke taint is the aromas that come from the cinders and the ash goes into the fruit of the tissue of the berry. It becomes like blotting paper, and it absorbs the aromas and flavours into the fruit as it ripens. As it gets closer to ripening, from January, February, before harvest in March, that aroma goes into the fruit. It won't go into the bark or the wood. It appears that has no effect. So it all starts all over again next year. Thankfully, I don't think we can stand another year without making any wine. I mean, psychologically, I want to make wine every year. Suddenly I'm not making wine, I'm a nuisance.
I want to make
Everybody
wine
hates
too.
Me. Everyone wants to make wine.
Yeah.
I want to drink it. So
Yeah.
now we're going to try the Merlot. This is the 2016 Merlot.
How close do you think this Merlot is to being the Merlowe, Lowe?
Every year we get better at it. Of course, this is one of these typical problems when you're trying to set your bar really high, and I want to make some of the greatest Merlot in Australia, and we're getting closer. I think the 16 was the first genuine one I was really enlivened at. The 15 had all the characteristics of great pomerol, gaminess, some fruit plum in it, but it was very soft, and it's starting to age quite quickly. So I wanted the wine to have more time in the bottle. The 16 is the first of these Merlots that has got some strength and to carry through. These wines will last and improve for 20 years. I opened a 2000 Merlot the other day, which is now 20 years old, and it was surprisingly still okay. Old, but okay. Merlots really are more primary fruited wines. In other words, what you get with them initially is a fragrance that is quite uplifting, quite perfumed. And so we sort of plum. And all the wines that I make, we try to put not too much nonsense on the back, just a little bit about how we make the wine and what we see in the wine. But these wines do transform over the years. They have the duality of being easy to consume now, but in time they're much better for it. Those of you who are on our wine club will come to the cellar door know that we bring out old bottles from time to time, and we will, as we promised, bring you some options to buy some of these older wines, so you can buy maybe a young Merlot and old Merlot and try them side by side. Last night I did a virtual tasting with someone who was in Sydney, Western Sydney. They phoned in and I did a tasting in front of them for someone's birthday and a dinner party. That was really great fun for them and me. We opened 6 bottles of wine and I got to take 6 bottles home. Anyway, so the back label on these wines, and in a lot of wine companies and a lot of places around Australia, we put a lot of information, not rubbish, but generally interesting information. And if there's anything anyone wants to know more about it, it's one of the future topics I'd have, would be I'm happy to go through and explain what you can see on a wine label. Now, anything that we want to know about what I'm doing here on the farm, in the vineyard, or winemaking, or anything to do with aspects of the wine industry that I'm able to help you with, happy to take your questions. You can email me, you can text me on social media, and I'm happy to cover those topics for you. I'm going to just finish off now by just having a last sip of the Merlot. Again, this is a wine with lots of aging prospects, and it's got strong tannin, that is the dryness in the mouth, but it will soften with time. That's what age does to things. It's like me, we're getting old, I get softer with age.
Well, and in this episode of Fashion on the Vineyard, many of our friends and followers want to know where you get these lovely shirts from.
I couldn't possibly disclose my sources, you know. That's my intellectual property. But anyway, it's a bit warm on the inside. I'll give you a clue. It's from the northern hemisphere. So this one is not from some tropical paradise. It's from somewhere in the northern climates. So we'll see what happens next week. What I can find next week for you to have a look at. Signing off. Thanks. Come and keep talking to me. Send me some feedback. Happy to do any more questions. Cheers for now. It's lovely.